Good morning and happy Wednesday. Today is April 1st, 2020, and we're on lesson 4 of Unit 6. Today we're going to be practicing the sound is EA, which is what we learned yesterday, and then we're going to be listening to a read aloud of America in 1812, Part 1. Today you are going to need a blank sheet of paper. Lined paper would probably be best, but if you don't have that, blank paper is fine, and a pencil. So if you don't have those things, go ahead and press pause, grab paper and a pencil. This slide should look familiar from yesterday. We have the sound at the top, and at the bottom we have the two different ways to make that sound. The first one is E. 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 The next one is E-A. E-A, E-A, We're going to practice some words on the next few slides where the E-A is going to say Ready? Let's go. Try this one with you. Weather. Your turn. Threat. Health. Breath. I'm going to help you out with this two-syllable word. Let's start with the first syllable. In. Instead. Try this one on your own. Wealth. Nice job sounding out those E-A-F words. You've made it to our activity for today. This is where you're going to need your paper and your pencil that you got at the beginning of the video. This is a chance for you to earn a Grow Our Team point, so when you're finished with this activity, send a picture to the teacher that's been reaching out to you so that we can enter your Grow Our Team point. Your instructions for this activity are you are going to read each sentence and then write down the words that have the E-A-F sound. Be careful, there's some words in there that are trying to trick you. We learned another sound that E-A usually makes. Do you remember what sound E-A usually makes? It's not eh. What is it? Did you say E? Usually E-A says E, but its other sound that we learned in this unit is eh. So E-A can say E or it can say eh. Today you're going to look for the words where the E-A says eh, where the E-A says eh. Let's do the first two together. Number 1 says, I need to purchase peaches, bread, and cream from the grocery store. One of those words has the F sound. What word had the F sound? Bread. So on my paper, I would write number 1, bread. Just like this. Now I'm finished with number 1 and I can move on to number 2. I'm going to go ahead and write my number 2 underneath my number 1 like this. And now I'm going to read the sentence and see what word I need to write down. What would you like to eat for breakfast? Which word has the A making the F sound? Did you say breakfast? You're right. So I'm going to copy the word breakfast. Remember, it should be spelled correctly because it's right on the screen for you to copy. I have number 1 and 2 finished. I'll let you keep working to finish number 3 through 10. Go ahead and press pause and finish up this activity. Don't forget to send a picture to your teacher when you're done so that you can earn a Grow Our Team point. It's time to get started with our first read aloud for this unit. So you'll notice that Today and tomorrow, the stories that I'm reading to you do not have words. That's because in class, these stories actually do not come from the reader. These are just some background information that I'm going to share with you before we get to the reader so that we know everything we need to know that led up to the War of 1812. Let's get started. From 1775 to 1783, America fought Great Britain for independence. This conflict was called the Revolutionary War. Against all odds, America won. That means that they weren't expected to win, but they did. What had been the 13 original colonies officially became the United States of America. After gaining independence, the American people did not want kings or queens governing them anymore. Americans wanted to create a new kind of government. They wanted to be able to elect individuals to represent the people and act with their best interests in mind. They wanted a government that was by the people, for the people. To help create the new form of government, several elected leaders met in Philadelphia, where? In May and June of 1787. Some leaders who could not attend, such as Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, wrote down their ideas. Together, this group of leaders became known as the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers' ideas all came together in a document called the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution became the framework for the American government. A man named James Madison had a clear vision of how the United States should govern itself. James Madison is known as the father of the Constitution. Madison is known as the father of the Constitution because he put all of the ideas together by writing the Constitution with the help of George Washington and others. He also became the 4th president of the United States. Let's pause here for a comprehension check to make sure we understand what we heard so far. Question number 1. What is the name of the document that became the framework for the American government? You can say your answer out loud. Go ahead. Did you say the U.S. Constitution? The Constitution became the framework for the American government. Question number 2. Who is the father of the Constitution? Did you say James Madison? James Madison is known as the father of the Constitution. Nice work. Let's keep reading. For many years after the Revolutionary War, the United States grew larger and wealthier. Notice over here we have our 13 original colonies. And then they started adding on. Here's Ohio, where we live. I'll keep reading. New states such as Vermont, Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, and Louisiana were added. New territories were also settled. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson purchased the Louisiana Territory, from France. This purchase more than doubled the size of the United States. That means it got twice as big. It was growing fast. Let's stop again for a comprehension check. My question for you that you're going to answer out loud is, what was the name of the area of land that the United States purchased from France? Did you say the Louisiana Territory? It was the Louisiana Territory. If you said the Louisiana Purchase, you're also correct. Nice work. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, France and Britain went to war against each other. This series of wars became known as the Napoleonic Wars, named after the French leader at the time, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte wanted to make France the most powerful nation in the world. Britain was determined to stop him. The United States considered both France and Great Britain to be its friends. It did not want to get involved in these costly and destructive wars. Even though the Napoleonic Wars were being fought all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, They greatly affected the United States. Much of the United States' growth during this time depended upon trade with France and Great Britain. Britain and France had many merchant or trading ships. These ships sailed across the Atlantic to trade goods with the United States, Canada, and with many of the British and French-owned islands in the Caribbean. For example, the United States sent flour and tobacco to France and Great Britain. Great Britain and France received sugar and coffee or cocoa from other countries. Both countries wanted to stop the other from trading with the United States. They each also tried to prevent the other from getting money and supplies. They also did not want the United States to choose sides. To keep the French from trading with the United States, the British blockaded or blocked several U.S. ports. They also blocked several important ports in Europe. This seriously hurt U.S. trade. France and Britain both had large naval fleets positioned in the Atlantic Ocean to attack each other's ships. To make matters worse, the British and the French began to seize or capture American ships loaded with valuable cargo. It became almost impossible to safely transport goods from the United States to foreign ports. It was also more and more difficult for Americans to receive much needed goods. Merchant ships weren't the only ships in the sea. The United States and Great Britain also had naval ships. Life in the British Navy was not easy. Conditions on their naval ships were terrible, and punishments were harsh. Because of this, the British Navy had a hard time finding men who wanted to be sailors. To get more sailors, the British began to capture men from other countries' ships and force them to join the British Navy. Sometimes these sailors were British deserters. However, more times than not, the sailors who were seized weren't even British. But that did not stop the British from doing it. They even seized many U.S. sailors. This practice of forcing men into the British Navy was called impressment. The impressment of U.S. citizens upset the American people and the U.S. government. As time went on, the United States found that it was losing more and more valuable cargo, sailors, money, and even ships. They demanded that the British stop impressing American sailors, but the British refused. Last question before we wrap up today's lesson. What did the British do that angered the United States? Go ahead and tell me. Right, so the British sailors were stopping the U.S. ships, they were stealing their cargo, and they were capturing or impressing the U.S. sailors. They were also blockading U.S. ports. So the British were doing a lot of things at this point that were starting to make the United States very, very angry. Thank you for following along with our lesson today. I hope you watched the whole thing so that you had that opportunity to earn your Grow Our Team point. I'll see you again tomorrow for lesson 5.